Bill Gates, secretly, brought you Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. The Democrats' Inflation Reduction Act, which, according to the Congressional Budget Office, will raise taxes on the middle class by $20 billion and send an army of IRS agents after working-class Americans over the next 10 years, was made possible by Bill Gates and, to a lesser extent, Larry Summers, who have been known to hang out together. In an article published on Tuesday by Bloomberg that reads more like a fan club newsletter for Gates, the billionaire Microsoft co-founder talks about how earlier this year, when moderate Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema kept blocking the tax and spend bill because they thought it would raise taxes on the middle class, which it would, Gates says he used a relationship with Manchin that he had been building up since at least 2019. Gates was counting on more than just his usual optimism to solve climate change and other problems that seem impossible to solve. This has been his main goal since he stepped down as Microsoft's CEO 20 years ago. He told Bloomberg Green that he has been quietly lobbying Manchin and other senators since before President Joe Biden was elected, waiting for a rare chance to get a lot of federal money for the clean energy transition. From those talks, he had reason to think that the senator from West Virginia would help the environment, and he was willing to keep pushing the case himself until the end. People felt like, okay, we tried, we're done, and it didn't work, Gates said. I thought it was a one-of-a-kind chance. So he used a relationship he'd been building with Manchin for at least 3 years. We were able to talk even when he thought no one was paying attention. Bloomberg. We know, use a spoon to gag us. It seems that Gates and Manchin's bromance started when the billionaire wooed the West Virginia senator at a meal in Seattle in 2019 to get support for clean energy policy. At the time, Manchin was the Democratic member of the Energy Committee with the most experience. I've been talking with Joe for a long time, said Gates. Manchin walked away from the bill, again, in December because he was worried it would make the national debt, inflation, the pandemic, and the geopolitical situation with Russia worse. This is when Gates stepped in. A few weeks later, he met Manchin and his wife, Gail Connolly Manchin, at a restaurant in Washington, D.C., where they talked about what West Virginia needed. Manchin wanted to keep jobs at the center of the U.S. coal industry, which makes sense. Gates, on the other hand, said that coal plant workers could easily switch to nuclear plants, like the ones Gates' company TerraPower makes. Manchin didn't seem to be convinced. On February 1, he said that the previous version of the Inflation Reduction Act, Build Back Better, was dead. In order to change his mind, Democrats got together a group of economists and other people who had a lot of influence with Manchin, like former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers. Summers was able to convince Manchin that the bill wouldn't raise taxes on the middle class or add to the deficit. Colin O'Mara, the CEO of the National Wildlife Federation, brought in economists from the University of Chicago and the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania to ease Manchin's worries. Delaware Senator Chris Coons brought in a big name, former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers. Summers has been advising Democrats for decades. O'Mara said that the economists were able to send this signal, that the bill would help reduce the deficit. It will have a small deflationary effect, and it will boost growth and investment in all of these areas. By doing this, clean energy investments could be reframed for Manchin as a way to protect against future price spikes in oil and gas and a way to possibly send more energy to Europe. Bloomberg. Gates acted again on July 7, when Manchin was seen at the same Sun Valley Media Conference in Idaho where Gates was also present. Gates said, "We talked about what was missing and what had to be done. There were a lot of phone calls after that." Gates feels good about the new law when he thinks about it. He was able to do what he wanted to do. It was one of the best parts of my work on climate change, Gates said. There are two things about climate work that get me excited. One is when policy is done well, and this is by far the biggest time like that. He also likes to talk to people who work at climate and clean tech startups. I've heard about this amazing new way to make steel, cement, and chemicals. Bloomberg. In the article about how he gets credit for what happened, Gates says, "I don't want to take credit for what happened.